Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you all today toward this roundtable with our three guest artists. Sharona Franklin, I don't know if we can see Sharona. Yay! Véro, Leduc and Salima Punjani, thank you so much for being here. I'm also grateful for the presence of interpreters. Sarah, Brooke and Angel, who are with us today, thank you very much. And also thank you, Plural, for having us. So first of all, I would like to begin by acknowledging that today we are located on unceded indigenous land. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodian of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Tiohtià:ke, Moanyang, Montreal is historically known as the gathering place for many First Nations. Today it is home to a diverse population of indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connection with the past, present and future in our ongoing relationship with indigenous and other people within the Montreal community. Thank you. So before starting the roundtable, I wanted to specify that if there are some things I cannot preserve you from this afternoon, it's from my gorgeous accent when I speak English. But if there's something I can preserve you from, it's from my broken English and my ramblings when I speak English. So to avoid that today, I'm going to stick to my notes. I'm really sorry about that in advance, but trust me, this is for the best. So this is done and said. Before introducing the subject of this discussion again, I'd like to briefly introduce our three guests. Sharona Franklin, who is an artist, sculptor, meme creator, writer, designer, and advocate. Véro Leduc, who is a multidisciplinary artist and creative researcher. Salima Punjani, who is an artist and a curator. And I'm also a curator and a researcher, and I'm Sarah Heussaff. So we are together this afternoon to talk about your artwork and some of the thematics that emerge from it as Cripistemologies, access, embodiment, care, and resistance. And to synthesize, Cripistemology refers to the many different ways of apprehending the world via the rich and diverse experiences of disability, sickness, and/or deafhood. It also resists to conformist and normative ways of being and producing knowledge from art and interaction. It emerged from the disability and deaf activist, theoretical, and artistic production, and also from the literature of critical disability studies, critical deaf disability studies, disabled feminist perspective, all that produced by and for people expertises in these communities. So we can get to the art of the discussion, perhaps starting with a question for Véro and Sharona. I prepared some questions that I'm going to ask to one or two of you to keep this dynamism in the collective discussion, but for sure don't hesitate to answer. If you want to add something, add a question, please feel free to do it. So, here's my first question. I'm wondering, Sharona and Véro, as a deaf, disabled, sick, spoonies, crepe artist, what is your relation with accessibility in artistic field? And perhaps to specify, before to let you answer to this question, I will... Is everyone okay? Okay, cool. We can continue. Yeah, so I wanted to add that it is as much a question of physical, practical accessibility in terms of concrete access to places, like for creation, for exhibition places. But it is also a question of symbolic accessibility around the reception of your artwork, accessibilities to opportunities, and recognition by peers in relation to the height, at least, and artist expectation of the art world, again, in terms of production, of temporality, of regularity, of energy. So, here's this first question. I don't know who wants to begin. Sharona, if you want to. So we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Sharona.
Yes, it works.
Okay, great.
I don't know. Okay, so maybe you can try to speak a little more like that. We're gonna
Sure,
see if
yeah.
we can hear you better.
Yeah, a lot of my practice speaks to the complexities of static and non-static disabilities and the overlap of rare and degenerative disabilities as well. Can you hear me?
No, it's not sufficient, I think. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. So we keep rolling. So please,
Mhm.
sorry for that. Please, yeah, just follow. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. So, the works that you see here are mostly made of gelatin and pre-existing adaptive devices. In my day-to-day, I use a lot of adaptive devices. At different periods of my childhood and adulthood, I've went through a flux of using adaptive devices, needing them, not needing them. And also, I use a lot of, custom splints, things like this, which people don't often get to see when they see my work. It's more like in the home that I'm wearing these. Yeah, so I think as far as accessibility goes, it can be really complicated to get occupational therapy for an independent practice as a freelancer. Um, Finding accessible art studios that are affordable. I also work in a kitchen since I work with gelatin. I need like a stove and a fridge and a range and dehumidifiers and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of inequity in the visibility of what goes on in a domestic practice and how that could possibly translate into a more professional studio or the possibility of having a professional artistic practice outside of the home. I have applied for quite a few grants, but I think that there is a missing need for disability informed jurors on grants because without fully understanding the complexity of a person's mobility or disability needs, it's very hard to prioritize where grants go and what for, especially I think for sculptors because we use such specialized tools. Yeah, these are some cakes that I made like ages ago. Um, and each cake kind of, I used a lot of different tools. I use a lot of different adaptive tools that are for like aquariums. I use pet care tools. I use baking tools. I use woodworking tools. Um, all sorts of different things to manage heat and temperature, and also just the meticulousness of working with plants and also edible materials, keeping things super sanitary. And the electric static charge of different materials, you have to use different metals with them. Otherwise, everything, especially working with gelatin and plants, everything will just like cling to each other and yeah, so keeping the air very still in the room and keeping the air quality really clear as well, because the gelatin acts like a petri dish in replacement of agar, and it really absorbs any yeast, bacteria, humidity, and all of that. So I think that there's a lot of room for exploration in how to better provide accommodations and resources for artists with disabilities that aren't fully well understood. I also think with rare diseases, there's a lot less funding because there's just generally less people to educate the public. And then there's less people who contribute to research because there's less people living with the diseases. Some of my conditions are extremely rare, and it makes accessing resources pretty challenging. So I try to show that a bit in my work. And these are more adaptive devices that I made, a cane made of gelatin, and that's an adaptive knife made of gelatin. It's like an arthritis-friendly rolling knife, but I thought it reminded me of a little mushroom. So I use a lot of different medical equipment, like that has medical tubing in it. And I also use medicinal plants in my work. A lot of people think that they're resin or plastic, but it's all just gelatin. And it's mostly pig skin, actually, powdered pig skin. So it's starts as a powder, I hydrate it, I make molds, I mold it. Sometimes I shave it and sculpt it, and then depending on the way that I dehumidify it and dry it out, it will actually morph. So you can put heat and pressure and cold on different aspects, and it'll cause it to twist as it dries. Yeah, and then I think the next slide there is, oh, these are photographs, because I think a big part of access is, if you are homebound a lot, is disseminating information through images online or print media online, because transportation and fitting your medical needs and your abilities in with a professional exhibition schedule can often make it really difficult to travel to your own exhibitions. Also, finding funding for accommodations and travel assistance and all that can be a lot harder when you have higher care needs, like especially if you need IVs or things like that, and you can't really miss out on those treatments. So I haven't been to one of my own exhibitions for about I think 3 years now. But one of the ways that I get to share work from bed is making two-dimensional work or print media work like this. Yeah, this is part of my meme collection. It started off as a private joke, actually. I didn't put my name on it for a really long time. And I was trying to make, it was like a therapy project, actually. Like I was trying to make visuals of sort of little essays in my head on how to process my own experiences with disability, starting from childhood. Because a lot of it, when you're growing up, you don't have a language to put to your experiences. So I wanted to make something that was like super accessible, low barrier, that wasn't too aesthetically oriented and could, be understood by a large range of age groups and just people who maybe aren't interested in conceptual art so much. And then I have prioritized doing image descriptions to make the work accessible as well. So you see on the right there, there's an image description.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharona. Thank you very much. So we
Thanks.
can follow with Véro.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you also, Plural Fair, for the invitation to take part in this panel. So this is really an excellent question. I really liked when Sharona, you said that you have to fight full time for your accessibility. Yeah, it's really the same experience that I'm living. Often, when we think of cultural or artistic accessibility, we think in terms of public access. That's really interesting, but we don't think often enough about accessibility for the artists themselves. So first and foremost, we are artists, so we are part of the public as well. So when artistic dissemination is not accessible, it prevents artists of diverse abilities from being enriched from their own artistic communities and from the work of their peers. Fortunately, more and more institutions are making efforts in this direction, but there's still a long way to go. We still need to improve accessibility. 27% of the population is disabled. This is a significant number. It's more than a quarter of the population in the city of Montreal. So there is really a still long way to go to improve accessibility. As a deaf artist, my creative spaces are mainly my home studio and artist residencies. What makes my participation in creative venues possible is the presence of sign language interpreters like we have here today. And it's interesting that the Canada, Quebec, and Montreal Art Councils now fund access fees, which usually covers for the cost of interpretation where I go, so I can have access with sign language interpreter. So that said, accessibility isn't like turning on or off a light switch. On one hand, it's a whole spectrum of variations, from the absence of accessibility to full communicative accessibility with subtitles, interpreters, sign language medallions. On the other hand, there are other layers of accessibility, such as the social dimensions of interactions. To illustrate this, I want to share 2 examples with you. I'm not good with technology there. I better not try it. Okay, so last year I carried out a creative residency in Ivory Coast entitled Regards Croisés, Côte d'Ivoire, Québec. So we were 4 artists from Quebec and 4 artists from Ivory Coast. We created a grouped artwork on site for a grouped exhibition of paintings at Galerie Pièce Unique. For the occasion, I had 2 LSQ interpreters traveling with me, so this made my participation in almost all the activities accessible. So you can see in the image above on the right, you can see the interpreter translating a visit at the École des Beaux-Arts. This accessibility enabled me to discover Abidjan's artistic life, which is incredibly rich with talent. After my stay in Ivory Coast, I did... Oh, you can change it for me? Oh, thank you. So I have another example there. After my stay in Ivory Coast, I did a 2-month research creation residency in Portugal. I could have had an interpreter on site, but as it was a long stay, I worked mainly with remote interpretation. So you can see in the image at the top right, Sarah Hull, who is here today, is on my iPhone. So she can interpret remotely. And on the picture below, you can see during a mid-residency presentation, I worked again with remote interpretation with Zoom. And finally, you can see the other image for the end of course presentation. Sarah came and joined me in Portugal, so I was able to give my presentation directly in Quebec Sign Language and LSQ. Sarah translated in English, and the event was facilitated in French Sign Language by an artist from France, and also interpreted into International Sign Language by an Italian interpreter. So, in short, I was able to experiment with different sign languages accessibly context through my creation, each having their own advantages and limitations, of course. One limitation you can see on the top image there. I arrived at the residency. I was really excited to meet the other artists there. It was really great. But I had the remote interpretation. But at the same time, it was like weird because we were walking in the forest and the village, and I had like my phone. The interpreter was remote, and the internet wasn't working so good. So yes, I had access to interpretation, like I had access to the content, what people were saying, but I didn't have access to interaction, human social interaction, because it was kind of weird having the interpreter on my phone. Also, when we had a brunch, we often in the morning, we would meet for a brunch between the artists. So I had my iPad, Sarah was there on the table, but nobody would talk to me because it was just so weird. The interpreter was like virtually remotely there. So in the end, I just let go of the interpreter and I accept that I couldn't access the content, but I could access the human interactions. So thank you for inviting me again. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much for your answers. So yeah, now for my next question, I will turn to you, Salima, but also Véro, if you agree to continue. In the introduction, I have mentioned that experience of disability and deafhood, but like many other identities, actually can bring a certain knowledge and a way of thinking and producing. So how do experiences of disability, sickness, and or Deafhood. In form and tints, your own artistic practices in the method, the form, the choices, or perhaps the collaboration you make or you decided to not make. So yeah, this is my second question. Maybe we can begin with you, Salima. And then Véro. Thank you.
I wonder if I'm close enough. Okay. So I wanted to take you through a couple of my projects. So my name's Salima. I'm a multisensory artist. And my first foray into multisensory art was this project that you're seeing on the screen, where there are 3 light boxes that are playing stories of people with multiple sclerosis, including my own story, that have portraits of people in their own MRI brain scans, and like photography that portraits that I co-created with people that ask the question, like, how would you like to be seen? Because often there's a lot of assumptions and people kind of make up their own stories, but I really wanted to create an opportunity where we could mix like the reality of our brains having scars in them with us also being us. So when I was interviewing people for the project and talking to them, I had asked someone who was interested in the project, like, how would you like to be seen? And he said to me, like, well, I don't know, I can't see. So when Sarah asks about how I create the work, a lot of it is based on listening. And so this piece on the back of the light boxes, you'll see that there is a laser cut photography as well. And that was so that there would be a tactile experience, so that people that were low vision could also feel the work, and it's not just visual. That was my first time using vibrotactile technology, which is the main medium that I work with. So vibrotactile technology really expands the use of sound past the audible. So it's not just heard, but rather you can work with bass frequencies to create a felt experience, a more embodied experience. And so while I was asking people about their stories, I also recorded the live brainwaves as they were speaking. And those were played both through the lightbox itself as well as vibrotactile cushions that were on top of the work. And so this is kind of a mix of different forms and methods that I used to create as many different entry points as possible so that people could connect with the work with whatever felt possible for them. And this next picture is of a project that I did at Trinity Square Video in 2023. It's called The Space in Between. And what you're seeing looks like a living room, but it's actually a gallery that was created after I had sent out an accessibility menu. And what's an accessibility menu? Well, something I realized as I slowly started fighting my own internalized ableism was that I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't know what was possible. I didn't know what someone's like, oh, do you have any access needs? It's like, I don't know, like, what, like, I don't know if there's any have-dos, but at Cripping the Arts in 2019, I remember getting a call. Like, Cripping the Arts was like a disability arts conference in 2019, which was like super magical. And I was called, and the person was like, well, like, we just wanted to check in. Like, is there anything that would help you feel more comfortable in being present? And I just kind of like glitched a little. Like, I think I like let out like a beep or something, I don't know. And they were just like, no, tell us, like, what can we do? And it really changed the way that I saw how to think about accessibility, not just as like a need, but a desire. Like, what do you dream of? What do you desire? How do you want to gather? Because for a lot of folks that have either like, different things going on, whether it's like immunocompromised folks or, people that have, like different mobility needs, it's like, well, like, what needs to be in the space to support you in feeling like you can be present? So this piece was developed in advance from an access menu that asked questions like, what do you dream of eating? Who do you want to hang out with? What do you want to play with? And also, like, like, what's your COVID safety? Like, like, how would you like to be social in a space? And so I created a living room space. Well, there's a living room, a salon, and a kitchen, and a bed right in the middle, which seems to be a big part of my work. as a tired person. And there were actually contact microphones placed to record the mundane, unspectacular sounds of people being together. So it wasn't about extracting, it was really about like capturing unspectacular space. And so over 2 weeks, I held 10 gatherings that were developed with different folks from the deaf and disability arts community in Toronto. And so those micro sounds were recorded and then translated into a vibrotactile experience, which is actually being played through all of the furniture. So one part of it was that like a few of us did like foot baths and face masks together while eating pandan ice cream. And so you can hear us giggling with bubbles and like sit on beanbag chairs. Like it's really like amazing how unspectacular things are so special when spontaneous gathering isn't possible. So that space was the space in between. And I think that that really comes back to like, how do you make choices? And for me, it's like, my work is about relational art. It takes a lot of listening. And those are all very, very invisible things. Like, just for us to gather takes a lot. To book the interpreters, make sure that there's no beef between interpreters, you know, and people, you know, like there's like so much that I learned through that project of like, which interpreters are your favorite interpreters? Like, you know, like what's going on? And so I learned so much. And this is just like the last gathering with a few of my friends in Toronto. Like there's Alex Balmer and Jess Watkins, who are two blind playwrights and dramaturgs, and Kara Eastcott and Denny Park, who is the Access doula and Access coordinator. And you can just see like the joy of just gathering in this picture, I think. And so so that kind of was part of that. And this was actually really sweet. Some things that people asked for were like visual social cues. And so we had a series of different bracelets and ribbons. So like if you're feeling kind of like icy, we had like blue ribbons. And the pink ones were like, I'm feeling okay. And then there was like these like fluffy orange bracelets where like, I'm feeling super social, come talk to me. And it was really sweet because it's like, you know, like it just kind of helped to be like, all right, like let's give this person some space. Like there was like some little rainbows if you wanted like 6 feet of distance for COVID safety. Like it was really fun and playful. And I think that that's something that gets lost in accessible curation, is that it's not just like, what do people need? It's like, well, like, can we think of it as like fun and like what we desire, and how do we create dream spaces? Because it's really, really fun. Hard, but fun. And so just to not take up too much space, I wanted to share kind of where I'm going. So for the next couple years, so this is what you're seeing on the screen are different handmade paper pieces with ceramic fidget toys lined with gold that are symbolic of ginger. The paper is implanted with different chai spices, and there's silk-screened recipes from my mom of how to make masala chai properly. And, well, from, like, my background. There's all different ways. And so basically what this is a prototype of an at-home exhibition kit that I'm working on, because like something that I was really delighted by when we were all isolated was like the innovation in like online performances and at-home exhibition experiences and things that like for some folks it's not possible to go to physical spaces for whatever reason. And I don't want to forget about people. And sometimes I don't want to go out either. And like, as someone living with chronic illness, like, I would hope that people don't forget me and my imagination and my creativity. And so I'm working on creating at-home exhibition experiences for the next couple of years, thinking about audio description, you know, having smell in paper. I'm working with my friend Emily Cook at Paper House in Toronto to create maybe some scratch and sniff paper. I don't know. It's a process, but I'm really excited about it, and I would hope that it'll be an example of how to not forget each other. And that's the end of my thought. I'm going to go to Véro's pictures now.
Really interesting. Thank you. I really relate to what you said about access point, various access points to the artistic works. So it has a link of with my residency. I went to Portugal last year for residency creation. So this research creation residence in Portugal was entitled Quest for Unspeakable Truths. And the creation that emerged consisted of in a deaf music installation in which 7 sign music videos were projected onto 7 textures paintings that were engraved with haikus. So I had sign videos, deaf music integrated with the paintings. So can we change the... Thank you. Thank you for changing the images. So during the first month of the research creation residency, I first engraved the poems in Braille on the wood panels, and so I engraved them in Brailles, but then I actually created the 7 paintings, so starting first with layers of various blues, which I covered with several pale layers so that the sign language video's projection can be clearly seen. Change the picture. So during the second month, I produced 7 videos of sign music, deaf music. So you can see on the left, the picture shows the final paintings with the poetry in Braille. You can see at the top right an image from one of the videos in deaf music, sign music. And below the same image, you can see it, but with the projection onto the painting, the video projection onto the painting. So a lot of visitors commented on how fascinating the encounter of the video with the painting was, because they were not always sure what belonged to the sign music and what belonged to the painting. So it was really like they really merged together, the video and the paintings. So this residency really gave me the opportunity to think about the creative process, about ways of making the artistic experience accessible, not so much on a technical level, for example, with the audio description, but really through touch, so that everyone can experience the work from their own access points. So for example, blind people, but also sighted people can touch the paintings and appreciate the textures. And for people who don't know sign language, I've written poems that evokes the themes of the sign music that you can see on the video. So the poem really can give you access to the sign music. The poems will be recorded by voice, so that the blind people can listen to them during the next exhibition scheduled at May Montréal Art Interculturel in 2026 and at Tangle Art and Disability Gallery in Toronto in 2026-2027. So it will allow people to listen to the deaf music through poems. So I like the idea of having different point of entries to the art, because I noticed that we have a lot of preoccupation about giving access, but it's always really on a technical side. Like audio description is nice, but it's not really an artistic experience. Like you will only describe, oh, here's flowers, they are pink and green and they're in a vase. But if you can touch it, you really feel it a different way. So when you make assumptions that audio description is enough, you don't experience a different point of access. Like touching the art is really a new point of entry, a new way of experiencing the art. So it's really precious for me. It's really like you connect with your emotions, and you really can feel the art. So audio description is not really enough. You really need to feel the artwork with a different point of access. So I really relate to that. I want to give people different point of access to the art. Thank you.
Thanks again for sharing your experience and knowledge with everyone today. Each time I experience your work, I'm amazed by the way you both take into account a multitude of communities and needs. And speaking about that, I introduce my third question to Sharona and Salima. This time, is still okay for you? So I find an interesting common thematic notion in your two different practices, which is the relation with caring and collect. Sharona, in the way you collect everyday objects, medical objects, plants, and then how you treat them or fix them in gelatin or resins, making sculpture from them and display them in domestic and familiar environment. I think about Mace Made, but also Crip Sweet Home exhibition in Montreal in 2024. And Salima, in particular, in the way you collect narrative, testimonial, and organize collective experience that invite sharing and exchange, as we had seen earlier, but also I think about Le Coup d'entrée est un battement de cœur in the La Vie au lit exhibition in Montreal 2024. For example, also Sonic Death Cafe and connecting over masala chai, as you already talked about. So could you both tell us a little more about this relation with caring and collecting? What dimension, symbolism, or place you give it to it in your practices and in the way also you understand it? So Sharona, if you want to begin, feel free to do it.
Sure. I just wanted to say, Salima, I really liked what you were talking about bringing the mini gallery or the exhibition to people's homes, and like the transportable nature of that, and how that can kind of bridge a gap in the parasocial, which I think a lot of people with disabilities are always kind of living in somewhat of a parasocial experience of disconnect or distance. And Véro, what you were saying, how you were using your phone and just gave up, basically. I was thinking of how, in a strange way, you often, or you might, I don't want to speak for you, but you might feel parasocial in the presence of people. If you're going through a third channel of trying to communicate, or even multiple channels of trying to communicate. So yeah, I just wanted to comment on the parasocial and how with disabilities that can be something that we're often working against, sometimes working with, but often trying to bridge the gap of. And I think for me in collecting objects, most of my objects are secondhand or found or given to me at times, or just foraged in nature. So I think that kind of weaves stories between people who might have never met or could potentially meet in the future. For my photography project, New Psychedelia of Industrial Healing, I made assemblages of images, and I often would redonate those objects back into the world. So when objects go into my sculptures, they basically stay there until the sculptures disintegrate. But for this one, for example, the butterfly, there are a lot of different herbs from an organization based out of Vancouver called the Compassion Club or Compassion Society, I think. They've relocated as they were having limited funding, so they had to close down, but they provided so many herbs and natural medicines to people in the downtown east side and East Vancouver and Vancouver greater community. So they donated oat straw, and a good friend of mine, Carmen Papalia, he donated some cannabis leaves that he and his family had grown for their project Impaired. And a lot of those objects are recycled pharmaceuticals, foraged poppies, some old unused syringes, and butterfly catheter, butterfly IV kind of equipment. But yeah, I think there's this kind of parasocial experience when a lot of different people unknowingly or knowingly have contributed to a sculpture that kind of travels around like the butterfly has. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that topic. But these works are more related to care in the home as a recipe for care. So I really like to play on the familiar and take from historical references, but reimagine them, as so much of disability history has such a dark, I don't know, dark feeling about it, or even just like overtly or covertly, it can be harmful to the disabled experience, or, portray disabled people as pariahs or monsters and all these types of things. So I kind of like to play with old things like that cutting board with the recipes, and kind of bring up nostalgic ideas in people, but then redirect it to the inclusion of disabled experiences. And this sculpture is called Wish You Well. Each brick is made out of gelatin, and each brick is sort of a visual essay on different waste materials, old medical materials, and different herbs and poems, collage poems relating to like the systems of waste and pharmaceuticals in the water stream. So the armature, the actual armature of the well is made out of plywood and paper mache. And then each brick was molded and desiccated to fit in each section. And then this sculpture, it's called Hellraiser. It's kind of a joke on the movie, as like all the pins are sticking out of the head. This is just all these different old prescriptions that I've had out of the baby bed. And it's speaking to how young sometimes we're introduced to pharmaceuticals, and childhood consent, and what consent looks like for different levels of education. Because obviously, when a child is ill, the family doesn't always have the opportunity to even learn or understand about that illness. There's such an emergency that pharmaceuticals are given, and families are desperate and they just start treatment. And then there's reproductive harm, sometimes dependence, whether it's opioids or things like that, that the child hasn't really consented to, and later on has to cope with as an adult and process as an adult. Because as children with disabilities, especially with illness, taking pharmaceuticals, we don't have the capacity or language to learn about our treatments or the potential for them to alter our future. So that's an old baby crib, and then gelatin capsules that are dummy capsules. They're made of gelatin, you can fill them, but they're empty. And then baby bottle nipples on each of the bottles, which were all prescribed to me. I took all those bottles, so yeah. And oh, I forgot to say, the pill bottles are actually embedded in a blanket of gelatin, but it's kind of hard to see in the image.
Thanks,
I
Sharona.
think that's everything, unless you have any questions.
Thanks, Sharona.
Yeah.
So when I think about the relationship between caring and collecting, I think that it comes in a lot of different forms for me, like whether it's through biodata, like I think I mentioned the brain waves, and sometimes heartbeats, and sometimes kitchen sounds, and sometimes plants. It all depends, and it comes in a lot of different forms. But I think that the thing that I find that's like the common thread between collecting and care is that they're all starting points for connection. So I'm going to take you through a couple of projects that can give you a more concrete example of that. So the first one is called The Cost of Entry is a Heartbeat. And what you're seeing is someone holding a pillow that has embroidery of lavender filled with lavender and cherry pits and buckwheat hulls, wearing a mask during a guided collective dream at the Violi exhibition last year at Galerie UQAM that Sarah curated. And it's a spatial sound experience. It's a spatial sound experience where when you come in, you give your heartbeat, and that's the cost of entry. And the reason for that is that it's something we can all connect to, and it ends up being the rhythm of the piece. It's also a comment on capitalism and productivity, and saying that like your heartbeat is enough to be here, and you belong here because you have a heartbeat. And each person's heartbeat after they give it is actually added to a collective heartbeat. So the pulse of the entire piece is actually everyone's heartbeats averaged together. And it's complemented by field recordings that I made in Budapest in Hungary. So essentially, in 2020, I was invited to a residency at the Spatial Sound Institute in Budapest. And it was a pretty weird time, honestly. And I found a lot of relief in thermal bathhouses. So I was recording with my iPhone and just like recording all of these different like sounds that I heard, and I created this rest experience because I felt that that we just needed some places to just be together where maybe there weren't words and people could just be and choose how they're in the space. And at the time, I'd just finished my master's in social work as well, so I was thinking about how to create trauma-informed experiences. And it was like deep isolation time as well, and curfews. And so I was thinking a lot about how people could choose how they wanted to be in a space, how much space they needed, giving them the agency to just choose their own adventure, really. And so this is an image of the Violi exhibition again. And so as you can see, there's like a projection in the background, there's vibrations, there's the heartbeat. It's kind of like this multi-sensory environment. And it's a chance to connect with others without the pressure of doing it in any certain way. And it's also an invitation to play. And so I also developed a smellscape for this piece, where I had a bunch of different bottles that as the images and the sound and the lights were changing, they were all changing kind of at the same time and connected to each other. I could guide people through a smell. So for the guided daydream, there was a different smell for every different scene of sound and vibration and light. And so it was really fun to design that, and I found a lot of joy in it. And it was also a way to use smell, keeping in mind that some folks really don't deal with smells well, and you never know how people react. And so finding a way to contain them was really interesting, so people had the choice. And so yes, I'm really excited by smellscapes, actually. And this is the most recent iteration of the cost of entry as a heartbeat, which was at the Phi Center in January this year. So you can just see people kind of like cuddling, and a kid made like a little sauna out of cushions and stuff, which was really cute. And it felt really nice to be in that kind of space set up temporarily, because my dream for this project is to actually bring the rest experience into communities where maybe like imagining rest feels so completely out of the imaginary. And I think that I'd like to bring it into spaces and not necessarily have it in like an art-specific space, so that people can just come and be. And so I've been developing a mobile spatial sound studio for a couple years to make it a bit easier to make that experience more accessible, both in terms of, you know, like not just necessarily having it open to folks that might already have art and galleries and these spaces in their repertoire, and like bring it to them. That's kind of really what I dream of. And yeah, so this is a piece that I'm working on right now. It's opening at La Centrale for the symposium called How Do We Protect a Radical Idea? And I was really inspired by companion planting. So like I was at this residency with the Vibrofusion Lab in Hamilton last year, and I visited the Royal Botanical Gardens, and I have never seen a messy rose garden. And this was a messy rose garden, and it was wonderful, because instead of using commercial pesticides, they completely, from the ground up, had to completely redo the garden because there's a commercial pesticide ban. So instead of just having these pristine roses, they were complemented by like lavender and calendula and all of these things that help to to help each other mutually thrive. And so in thinking about how to protect a radical idea, I actually asked people to contribute plant cuttings, and I've been slowly growing them since January. And so every couple days I get to see all the roots growing, and it's so delightful. And I'm so amazed that people were so generous in giving all of these different plant cuttings. And so what's going to happen, and you're very invited to come, is that you can actually bring a cutting of your own and trade it, or just take one and leave a word behind. And it'll be a constantly evolving poem of answering the question, how do we protect a radical idea? For me, it has to do with generosity and reciprocity, a form of like connection to people in a way that feels possible in a very chaotic, difficult time that we're living in right now. And yeah, so what you're seeing are two folks that gave me a ton of cuttings, holding each other's hands and holding a jar. And you can come to La Centrale and experience that. But in terms of thinking about caring and collecting, I think, you know, like it may seem simple, like trading plants, but I think that there's an element of slowness, anti-urgency, and like finding ways to connect to each other that's really kind of a common thread through the work, creating these spaces where we can be together, where we can dream together, we can imagine together. And that's the end of my thought.
Thank you so much. This is so cool, and I think I recognize these ends. So I'm going to check if we have time for last question, maybe. Yeah, cool. Okay. So before to open to a 20-minute discussion with the public, I've speak about crip theory and method, activist knowledge. And I'm wondering how it takes place in your artwork, but also maybe disability justice, as I know this is something really important for you, Salima, in your artwork. So my extra question for both of you, and maybe you can answer briefly, if it's possible to answer briefly to that, but take your time, we have time. So how do crip theories and methods, activist knowledge, and disability justice take shape in your artwork of all of you? So I don't know who wants to begin answering this question. Yeah, Sharona, please.
Thank you. I think about this question a lot, actually, because, you know, disability is not a monolith, and everyone's experiences and desires in their own access needs and their own pride and route about living with disabilities is completely different. I never grew up in an intellectual environment or any environment informed by disability justice. That was something that I only really started to learn about in my very late 20s, honestly, and more so in my 30s. I'm still in my 30s, but so when I first learned about all of this disability justice movement, I feel like I took pretty radical perspectives on it, and it was a really therapeutic process for me. It was almost like a radical healing approach to, wow, we can have rights, or we can speak up, because most of my life I had tried my best to hide my disabilities and felt like they were only a hindrance. So I think it can be complicated as a public figure or representative or artist with a disability to feel like, you know, advocating for your own needs and then not trying to hinder other people's needs, or not trying to you know, convince the viewers that your perspective is the only perspective. You know, I try to always remind younger people with disabilities who like reach out that everyone has their own approach, and they might have different boundaries. Even for myself, like I've definitely felt that a lot of my more radical ideas don't sit with me very well in the long term. I think in the moment of so much hiding and privacy and shame, in the moment I was really excited to be like full on proud of my disabilities. And now that time has passed, I'm actually just such a shy person that it's not how I navigate the world. So for a lot of us too, I think our art practice and our advocacy practice is consistently a learning practice of how we're living in the world and how we want to engage with others. Yeah, but I don't have a background in disability justice, and I'm still just learning about different movements and different ways of existing. But I will say too, speaking earlier to accessibility, we're often public advocates within our work, but then we're advocating for ourselves in our medical world where we're trying to access care, and then we're advocating for ourselves in access in our work. Whereas like if we worked at an office or something like that, we would have an HR and maybe an OT and other people helping navigate. But as freelancers, we're doing a lot of double advocacy, which can lead to a lot of burnout. So I think that finding new ways to advocate, whether it's print media or access riders or things like that, can be helpful to save us a lot of energy so we can really focus on our creative practice. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's often a team project, or at least this exhaustion that we're gonna have if we keep it individual. So allies are really necessary. Thank you very much. Every one of you want to answer to the last extra bonus question.
Yes, of course. Can we go back to the image? I had an image for this. Thank you. So the expression cripping the art, for me, it turns crip theory into an action verb. So in this sense, it's not just about making art about our realities, but from them. That's really important to me. Also, the concept of deaf gain puts forward the positive belonging to deafhood. So my work has been rooted in the theme of deafness for 12 years now. I approach this theme not only from the angle of reflections, but also from the way we do things. For example, as there is no sign language writing system used in Quebec, I created a graphic novel in sign language that you can see called C'est tombé dans l'oreille d'une sourde, It Fell on Deaf Ears. I interviewed deaf people and edited it with cartoon video effects to give access to the work to people who don't know sign language. I used phylacteries and translated the text into written French. So if you want to see the comic strip, it's also available in English. I've put the link on the slide. So you can go and visit the website. So it's in sign language and in written English. About your question, justice is really intersectional for me. It's really important to think who's present and who's not present at the same time. So you really need to try to represent the diversity of perspectives. And as Sharona said earlier, if I'm one deaf person, but it's not all deaf person who have the same perspective. So it's really important to think about that and represent different experiences. So in my comic strip, you can see a variety of different deaf people. One comes from Somalia, another comes from England. So it's really interesting to learn about the different experiences from deaf people here in Quebec, but also in different countries around the world, because deaf people really have different experiences about deafhood, disability. So it's really important to be aware, so you develop a really good knowledge of different ways of experiences from deaf people. So, yeah. Thank you for the question.
And finally, Salima, do you want to answer?
So, I think that when I think about disability justice and a lot of the things I've had a chance to learn over the past few years being kind of deeply in the disability arts community. And I mean, community is difficult. There's so much access friction. There's so much going on that it's like, I feel like there's nothing that's universal. There's nothing that, like, I don't know, like I quite honestly sometimes, like, you know, just reflecting on what Sharona was sharing about trying to fight for more accessible spaces for others, for ourselves and everything, is that, like, I feel like I'm wearing 20 different hats at once, and my actual time to create is very, very low. And I wish I didn't have to be extra able to fight for more accessibility. And so I guess that's something I dream of in the future, in a way, is that there's like more understanding and that people can experience how much like joy and love and care that thinking about accessibility and the play that comes with that can bring. And so it's not up to the people fight. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of brain fog, admittedly, right now. But I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like, without getting too negative, is that I just truly, truly hope that people get a chance to experience like the love and care that comes from these spaces so that it can model what's possible in the future and more of us can start working towards it. Maybe that's like idealistic, but I just truly hope that people can experience that feeling, because it is magic. And I've told this before and I will tell it again. Like at Cripping the Arts, there was like this dance party at the end, and it was so beautifully curated. And it felt like there was like glitter in the air. And to this day, I do not know if there was glitter in the air or if it's just like what I felt. I highly doubt there was like really glitter in the air, because I feel like it's not great for lungs and environment and everything. But all that to say is that like the joy and pleasure and love and care that are in these spaces are so rare and so beautiful. And I truly hope for all of you that you get to experience it. Not to glamorize it either, like it takes a lot of work. I've had multiple burnouts and relapses because of the amount of detail and listening that goes into my work. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. End of thought.
Thank you so much for your generous answer. We have learned a lot today. Thank you very much. This is not an easy exercise, so thank you very much. And yeah. So I don't know if there is some question for our three guest artists in the audience. Yes. A mic is coming.
Hi, thank you so much for this discussion and your time and knowledge. I'm actually a Montreal-based artist that's part Indian as well, and I incorporate chai smells into my paper, and something that's come up for me in my paper making process, because being part of the South Asian diaspora, there are different ways of preparing chai depending where you're coming from and your background. And I'm wondering if, because this has come up for me, is that, you know, I worry that we'll lose a lot of that diversity within the South Asian diaspora if we only have one smell of chai. But then how do we also, you know, build community and you know, create that kind of chai smell in the different papers to honor the diversity within the community? So have you like been able to kind of do some research into that and connect different communities of the South Asian diaspora to kind of cultivate or gain recipes from different backgrounds to create chai?
Thank you for your question. You know, when I first started doing this project, I prototyped it at the Banff Center in 2023. And in Japan last year, I actually went to a photography festival in Kyoto. And there was someone there that was actually talking about how, like, for me, I always thought of chai as like this like connecting, beautiful thing that you slow down and it's anti-urgent and not productive. And no matter who shows up when, like, you make the slow cup of chai as like this welcoming gesture, you know? I'll get to your question in a second. But this person had photographs of cups that Dalit folks couldn't use to drink chai, because they have to drink it out of paper cups. They're not allowed to use the glass cups. And it just started to complexify my thinking about the project, because like there is so much to learn and there's a lot of connection to make. And I'm hoping by having, the next 2 years to slow down and do it, that I can kind of dig a bit deeper into that. But right now, I will admit to you, I do not know.
That's cool, and I think I'm still in research process as well. I have a second kind of follow-up question. So for me, a lot of my chai knowledge and just knowledge is stuff orally that my Dita told me and shared with me. And I'm wondering if you've ever done any intergenerational connection projects with your chai and your identity, and if so, is that something in the future as well? Or do you have ideas for multi-ethnic, intergeneral interactivity with tea making and tea incorporation into paper?
I guess like in micro ways, yeah. Like when I did an exhibition at the Phi Foundation in 2021, I met with an auntie and she taught me how she made chai, and she used bay leaves, which was wild to me. I had never thought to put bay leaves in chai. And we recorded the sounds together slowly, and I feel like in micro ways it's happening. And I like how it's happening more organically, where I'm not like, oh, I have to learn something, or I kind of think like my process of listening and connecting with people is really, I'm sure I could use more like rigor and things like that, but I kind of appreciate how that connection was made through like the Park X Curry Collective, and I got to learn more about all of these different things, and then I helped her bring a cabinet home, and it's like these little moments of relationality that I appreciate. And in that process, I learned about putting bay leaves in chai, and I do think that there's I have done work, a lot of my work was inspired by cooking with my mom, which is and then in talking to her about the chai, actually, colonization came up, because her dad, for instance, was like, no, we don't make that kind of chai, we make English tea. And I was just horrified and also so surprised, because I was like, I forgot about that side of colonization of for her dad, the English tea was superior, which is which just kind of broke my heart in a lot of ways. But it was also it made me think about how important it is to actually ask the questions now and to start connecting. And I would love to do more intergenerational work, but I don't want to do it quickly. I would really like to slow down and actually think about what is it that I'm hoping for, because I think that another part of my work that I find really interesting to consider is that I don't want to extract from people in a way, and I really want to be mindful of making sure that people know where their stories are going and how they're going to be used and what I'm doing it with it. Because even for my parents, they don't understand what I do. And often I feel okay, is this fair to my mom to be oh, tell me all these stories, and can I use your picture? Or hey, these are part of my projects. But I really think that before I connect to strangers, I really want to be super clear about what I am going to do with things and make sure there's a proper process of consent and understanding. And I would worry about just kind of being extractive, I guess. So slowness, end of thought.
Thank you. Thank you all for the beautiful presentation. I feel like I learned a lot. I have a question for everyone on the panel. I'm also a disabled artist, and I've been working with cultural centers and grant funding, and I find that there's kind of a timidness with cultural workers working with disabled artists. I feel like there's a fear of getting it wrong, and I'm curious about, for me, in my personal life with other disabled people, access tensions or frictions, as you called it, Salima, they don't seem so weighty or like a big deal. It feels like it can be kind of a generative experience where we can chat about it and have fun. So I'm curious, how, as disabled artists, can you kind of encourage others to not feel like it's such a closed practice, without feeling that need to, I'm trying not to say like advocate and feel that having to like explain, but I guess more in your personal interactions with other disabled people. Sharona, you had said that like disability isn't monolithic, and I've been finding that I've had a lot of really creatively fulfilling interactions with people and learning about their other disabilities and how that informs their way of life, and it's really inspired my art. So I'm just curious about your personal experiences with access tensions and how to talk about them so that it can feel like a welcoming space for others.
Sharona, maybe you want to answer, or I can go ahead.
Yeah, that's something that I'm really trying to sort out myself. I struggle with mutism actually. So in like high stress scenarios, that can trigger it. Also pain can trigger it. So it's usually those scenarios where you need extra communication. And unfortunately, mutism and silence, it doesn't work very well. So I do a lot of like I like to do written communication sometimes. But then again, written communication can be misread. So it's a really like I totally agree with you. There's a lot of apprehension and tension. It almost feels like the stakes are really high. I think people want to do right by each other and are, really nervous to make mistakes, because they don't want to like negatively impact each other's health or well-being, but also I think there's a lot of morality involved in it where people feel that they're being judged for their morality based on their mistakes. I've made like so many mistakes navigating other people's disabilities, and I've also made a lot of mistakes navigating my own. So I think just finding grace, and what I'm trying to like figure out for myself especially is um I've noticed that when I give access riders, it doesn't usually help. I don't know, maybe this is just my experience, but I've written probably I think like 5 different access riders, and I think that they scare people, honestly. So, and I've talked to other artists about it too. I see Salima, you're nodding your head. I think that people think it's so contractual, when really for me with mutism, it was almost like, okay, I can save time. I can just be at home working on my art. They can ask me questions if they need to around my access barriers. But I found that access writers have kind of not been helpful. But I think that starting relationships saying, hey, like, I'm figuring out what's best for me. We can make mistakes. Sometimes even saying like silence might not be a bad thing. It might be mutism related or brain fog related or pain related or other disabilities related to intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities if you're trying to communicate via email. I think just keeping things really fluid is the best approach. But I also think like this time in history, um, we're really one of the first generations of artists who are being given this communal platform to create together with the like overarching idea that we're disabled artists rather than I think previously, historically, it's been the individual disabled artists. So there's more awareness than ever. And I think that is something that we're like collectively navigating. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that was helpful, but I feel you. I'm on the same page. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I think just briefly in any art space, I think that there's like not a lot of space for actually moving through conflict, whether it's mediation, discomfort. It's like there's a lot of work around soothing, but not a lot around staying with the discomfort. And it happens again and again and again where whether it's like standing up for dignity or conditions or whatever, that it makes people uncomfortable, especially living with invisible illness. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you need anything? You know? And it's something that I find is really missing, and I would love to actually find a way, like either like I was thinking about in contracts with people, like having like a mediation clause to be like, if something comes up, let's not be cruel to each other. Can we listen? Like, can we go through mediation, and having these different processes built in? Because once it happens, sometimes I feel like it's natural that when conflict arises or people feel threatened, they get defensive and then emotionally and cognitively shut off. It's studied. It's like, you know, it happens and it's normal. But in those situations and in kind of like volatile environments where there's a lot of like vulnerability and creativity on the line and vision, and you know, like these are naturally spaces where conflict arises, and I haven't seen many good ways of dealing with it or lived through many good experiences of dealing with it. And I would love, truly, truly love to see some examples of how to do that or build them. End of thought.
Maybe I can add briefly. I'm a professor at the University in Quebec in Montreal. So I created a program called Disability and Deafhood. So I'm really interested. I researched this question related to cultural equity. So we have a new lab called Disability, Deafhood, and Innovations. So we really try in this lab to encourage artistic residencies, so people from diverse abilities, so whether they're deaf, have chronic disability, or whatever their disability, they can meet together and find new ways to discover who they are, to create together through their disability with arts. So it allows us to make mistakes. It's really a safe space when we can create, be who we are. So the way to make no mistakes is to do nothing. You know, there's only way to do no mistakes is to do nothing. So if we are doing something, we have to accept that we're going to make mistakes, of course, but we take care of each other. We allow people to make mistakes, and we accept this, and it's just part of the process. We're human, so we will make mistakes, and we navigate through this together. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time, so I really want to thank you, Sharona, Salima, and Véro. I was really impressed to share the stage and the screen with you today. So thank you for your presence and for sharing also your thoughts and expertises with us today. It was super generous of you to do that, and yeah, I was super. I'm over fan of your artworks, also. Thank you for the audience for your attention, for the rich discussion we had today. Thank you to the interpreters for their adaptability, and finally, thank you, Plural, for having us today. Thank you both.
Thank you, Sarah, as
Thank
well,
you.
for facilitating. It was really rich. Thank you for your beautiful questions.